Welcome to another episode of Bootstrapped Solo. I am your host, Pratik Shah, and today we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. About growing your own practice is what we normally talk about, but what we're going to be talking about today with our special guest, Jake Heller, is growing your own tech company. So this podcast is for those that want to know what it's really like to start, run, and grow a business. In this case, today's guest is Jacob Heller, who is the CEO of Casetext. It's a 100-person technology company that started back in 2013, and he's been growing strong ever since. Jake, welcome to the show.
Super happy to be here. Good to see you, man.
No, good to see you. It's always great to see you. Thank you so much. I mean, you've been all over the news lately. It's been really amazing to see what Casetext has delivered. And for those that don't know what Casetext is, it's an online legal research company. It's what a lot of more of the, I would say, fair to say, the more modern firms are using versus Westlaw or LexisNexis. I like using it. That's what I use. And so, we met at a conference and we started talking tech. And I love these kind of origin stories. And so when you told me you started your shop in 2013, your company, I mean, nobody was looking for tech back then.
That's super true. I mean, we've been focusing on AI in law since long before that was cool. And back
Right.
in 2013, a decade ago, really where the state of the art of the technology is it only let us do so much to help our clients, right? It's obviously evolved considerably since over the last decade. And we're talking about in the last few months, we're seeing AI that's operating at the kind of intelligence and reading comprehension and understanding and reasoning of postgraduate. But at the early days, we're still finding ways to provide a lot more value. And you're right, we started with legal research, so we thought that was an area where technology can make a really big impact, and better technology make a big impact.
Right.
And it's amazing to see really what the kind of pushing the boundaries of what the state of the art even is has put us in a position to do even more for folks today.
Yeah, you bring up so many good points. I mean, one being when people talked about AI or they talked about technology back in 2013, back in even 2020, it was a lot more rudimentary. And the only
Yeah,
people that were talking about generative AI or large language models were at these like AI conferences where all the nerds hung out. And now it's like everybody knows what those terms mean and everybody understands. But this was something that, visionaries like yourself and other folks that were involved in AI from the very beginning kind of saw this coming a little bit.
yeah. That's. I mean, we knew early on that artificial intelligence would make an enormous impact on the practice of law. To be honest, when we started the company, we couldn't have imagined how amazing artificial intelligence would get over what is, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively short period of
Right.
time.
Right.
Because at the time, what artificial intelligence meant is it could make you more proficient at searching, right? It could help parse through data and put things into piles. Like this stuff is relevant, this stuff isn't relevant. This is, potentially overturned, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of value there in the older versions of artificial intelligence, but it was nothing like what we're seeing today, right? We're
Yeah.
one of those very lucky companies that began working with OpenAI uh, for the better part of the last year, and it's working on their newest model, GPT-4, which we still think is the like absolute state of the art of what this technology can do. And the gap between GPT-4 and even previous models like GPT 3.5 and 3, and especially compared to where we were like a decade ago, it's considerable. It's absolutely considerable. As one
Oh,
data
it's light
point,
years.
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's like one data point on this. We commissioned a study on this uh, where we found that GPT 3.5, the thing that everybody got excited about in November of last year, right, just 6 months ago, um, took the bar and got in the 10th percentile. GPT-4 takes the bar and hits it in the 90th percentile. So we're talking about
Wow.
as good as 9 out of 10 lawyers, right? Like very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild how
That's
fast things got good.
No, it's really wild. And it's just, we're only 6 months in. I mean, you
Yeah,
were mentioning that at the beginning. It's like we're 6 months in. Where we're going to be 5 years from now or 10 years from today is going to be night and day. You can't really even envision where you're going to be. We can all take this technology of GPT-4 and what we see and envision it in our little niche practices. Like obviously with Esquire Tech, I think about how we can use it in the discovery process. You do it with legal research and legal analysis. And And that's just in the lawyer space. Then you have everybody in travel and all these other industries that are thinking in themselves of how they want to use it, right? Open table, it's like you can now, if there's now that the API is connected, you can go and say, I want an Italian dinner on this date for two of us in Little Italy at this time. What's available? And it'll do it for you. And you don't have to, all those extra steps of self research are kind of taken away. And this is just a very basic level. There's so many deeper connections that can be made. But I want to go back to the beginning of Casetext in 2013. I mean,
Yeah,
you're at
yeah.
100 people now, but you started with just you probably.
Just a few of us in the very beginning. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
you know, at the time, we had actually the same kind of mission and vision as you do now. We really believed that new technologies can really benefit lawyers. I remember having these situations. I was working at a big law firm at the time, and I previously worked in government at smaller law firms at
Yeah, we should probably
nonprofits.
establish
Yeah,
that you're a licensed lawyer as well. Like
yeah,
I should
yeah.
let people know that
Well,
you're a
I guess
licensed
I'm
lawyer. You work big law.
technically a retired lawyer. I'm not sure how it works exactly. I'm paying the bar dues, but I'm no longer practicing, so you can't ask me for legal advice. I remind all my
Yeah,
friends and family about that all the time. Like, I don't really know what I'm
yeah,
doing anymore with that. It's been 10 years, but so I practice law, and I mean, I don't know if you've had the same kind of situation, but I remember there being so many moments when I'm up to like 4 a.m. at the office. I am trying to answer what should be a relatively simple question, whether it be in research or discovery or anywhere else. And then the next day I'm using like Google or Yelp or something, and I can find a Thai restaurant that's open with like a vegetarian option, near me with delivery option. Like that's
right.
trivial. So like finding something that is like kind of silly and small, like a meal with consumer technology was super easy. And then finding the case that might get my client like out of jail, right?
Right.
Or may make a difference in $1 billion lawsuit. That's super hard. That felt backwards to me. The level of
Yeah.
importance of finding the right restaurant was like whatever compared to the enormity of things that are happening in law practice every single day. And so at the
Yeah.
time, we were just like, listen, if we could just take the best of what was happening in consumer technology and apply it to legal technology, that itself would be a major, major, major step up. And I think we've had that same general philosophy for the last decade. It's been about, okay, well, there's been this breakthrough in AI. It's cool to chat with. It's interesting. Like you get this a cool experience there, but how do you then make that into
Yeah.
something actually useful for professionals? Something we think about a lot.
No, I think that's a great way of thinking about it. I mean, my own kind of late night, early morning story is had to do with discovery, right? In the sense is that I'd be up late at night copying and pasting discovery responses, and I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah,
And that it's exactly the same. So for anybody out there who's like got that feeling of like this is a ridiculous process, current process, I mean, that might be the impetus for you to start your thing and don't just dismiss it as, oh, that's just the way it's always been done.
totally.
Think analyze on how you can use these new technologies for yourself. But so Casetext, you guys, the point of the impetus of it was to make legal research easier and using those consumer technologies to make it easier for yourself. But obviously, the big players in the space are Westlaw and LexisNexis. We all use them in law school. We all use them in our law firm jobs, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, when you took on that task, you knew you were going to be going up against some of the big dogs.
Yeah, and obviously they do it really well to some degree, right? Like they have some of the best databases of information ever been assembled, right? Not even just in law,
Yeah,
just generally speaking. They have great brands, reputations, they're ubiquitous. I think in order to start a company, you have to be a little naive about the challenges ahead. That's what one of the realities here is. You have to just be a little bit naive, um, and it's a healthy amount of naivete that gives you this
right,
like confidence. Like, yeah, we can take on the big guys. And what's been interesting as it's evolved, that we started very much as a directly competitive product to Westlaw and LexisNexis. And for many years, actually, a lot of law firms chose to buy Casetext instead of buying Westlaw or LexisNexis. That is less true now. Like, really, the main
mhm,
focus of the business is on CoCounsel, which is our new AI-enabled product. And we found is that sometimes there are opportunities to take something that currently exists to make it better, and you can make a business out of that. And sometimes you're doing this in Esquire Tech. There was no existing great technology platform to do the stuff that Esquire Tech does, right?
right,
And you know, similarly, there is kind of no great platform for building what we're building today, what we're calling an AI legal assistant, which
Right.
by which we mean there's a number of tasks: legal research, document review, analyzing contracts, and much else that you can just delegate to this AI assistant. That didn't
Yeah.
exist before, right?
No.
And you
Right.
find sometimes you start to shift the focus of the business somewhat to a new problem in a new area against, there's not many big competitors. um, you end up having a lot more success, and we're seeing that for sure on our end.
But there's two things I want to jump in on that. One is, co-counsel is recent development. That you've been working on for a couple of years, but the legal research side of your business has been around a long time. And so when you launched it, you did deal with competition, and you did have to
100%. Yeah,
pitch. Your law firms that you were going and pitching to use Casetext were already using an established. They were already using LexisNexis or Westlaw, and you had to get them to show them why your product made more sense or why they needed it in addition to it.
totally.
But what I want to touch on is when we talk about technology companies and we talk about new businesses, people always say, "Oh, that already exists," or "There's some competition out there." But we hear about people starting a personal injury firm all the time, and there's tons of personal injury firms. So for some reason, there's this misconception that just because there's competition that exists in technology, you can't start your company, but in every other service business, you can. And we need to break that ideology.
That's so the case, and um, I think lawyers in particular, we're taught from law school to be like base everything on precedent first of all, and so
Yeah,
sometimes you see folks who are like, well, has anybody ever done this before? And if they're not finding other great examples, sometimes they kind of back away. And so,
yeah,
part of what you have to do when you're starting a new business and when you're starting a new firm is sometimes do the unprecedented, which is unnatural for us based on our training,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
then to add to it too, yeah, sometimes it is scary to go into a place where there are established players, and that is true to starting a firm in a city, for example, where there is, you know, really established, larger law firms that currently already take on the kind of area of practice. And I think what you find is that no product is perfect, no service is perfect. Um, People will like aspects of what you build. They're going to like, uh, that your practice is able to do it faster and cheaper and smarter, or that you bring a certain type of experience to it, who you are in the courtroom, the kind of personal connection you make. This is not offering that anybody else in the world has, only you have it, right? Same thing with
yeah,
the technology company. Sometimes products that from a big distance, like, oh, it's the same category. I could, like, price matters, quality matters, speed matters, comprehensivity of resources matters. All that matters, and there's almost always space. I mean, like, there's Ford and Tesla and
right,
Volvo and, right,
right,
almost always space. If you tap
right.
into something that people really want, and that's the key, is to make something that, you're seeing a gap in the market, and you're seeing something that people really want. Um, you can start a business there, and you can do really, really well for yourself. And I think that's true universally. I totally agree with your sentiment here. It's like there is so much that I think people scare themselves away from starting something when they really should be just
Yeah.
diving in and figuring it out.
Yeah, and you can look at it either way. There's people that say nobody's ever done it, so I don't want to do it, or they say nobody's ever done it, so I'm going to go do it, and
Different
then vice
personality
versa,
types.
right?
Yeah, different
Yeah, it's
personality
the
types
two
sometimes.
personality, and you gotta lean into the kind of cowboy version of yourself that says, "I'm just gonna go do it. Like,
Yeah,
let's just go do it and see what happens." And so you start this company. You have to go out and, first of all, you can't violate any trademarks or violate any copyrights that Westlaw and LexisNexis
of
have. You have
course.
to be
Yeah,
careful. We know of companies that have fallen into that trap, and but you have to go and get all this information and data out there to have this legal research database. How did you go about doing that?
the wonderful thing about American, like, law is that, it's all public, and, like, there's literally a
Mm,
statute that says you cannot copyright the law. And so, uh, and increasingly, like, courts are going online, right? Increasingly, you're able to find statutes, regulations, rules, cases online. So that already puts you in a position where it's not easy, because there are 50 states, many municipalities, you know, 200 some
federal.
odd, federal district courts, right? A dozen appellate courts. All of them have their own systems. It's not easy, but it's possible to start gathering all this data and information. What made our lives a lot easier, actually, is that there are already folks out there who've taken the extremely difficult task of digitizing, America's law. And working with them, working alongside them, part of, what we're doing is getting the data ourselves. And a big part of what we're doing is leveraging the work that they've already done. And, you know, they really help you, there are companies out there that can really help you get like a start should one be interested in like reviewing, all of American case law or all of American statutes or what have you. Right. And
Yeah.
so it's not easy. And there's a ton of work that goes into it. A lot of it's like very detail oriented. It's like, okay, well, in this jurisdiction, actually, they publish in this book and not in that book. So you have to make sure to go buy those books and digitize them and turn them
Yeah.
into, right. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing, but it's doable.
So how long from the date you started in 2013 to when you started gathering all this information from day one, when was your first paying customer?
It's a really interesting story. Probably 2 or 3 months, and
Wow, that's pretty quick.
yeah, it's like from even the idea to kind of first paying customers a few months. We were lucky. We were
Did you
part of
already
this
have
program.
all this data before?
No, that was part of the process, man. So you have to work really fast. I mean, part of we were lucky in a lot of respects. One of the respects in which we were super lucky is that we got into this program called Y Combinator, which is they're investors, but they also put you
Yeah.
through a 3 month long program to prepare you for running and operating a startup. A lot of advice. You hear from some of the best kind of startup leaders in the world during that 3 month experience, and at the very end of it, there's this thing called Demo Day where you present your progress over the first 3 months to a room full of Silicon Valley's best 500 investors, and how you do there will determine whether your company basically lives or dies, whether you get money to continue to operate. It's a pretty high stakes kind of thing. And so they really impress upon you the importance of moving quickly in the early days and getting something out there and establishing whether there's what's called product market fit, which is a concept used a lot in technology, but I think it applies equally in services businesses like law as well. Is this the service or product you're offering into the market you're offering to? Is there the price point you're offering at, et cetera? Is there a demand there? Is there serious demand there? If there is, then you're in a good place. If there isn't, then you have to keep on working on it. And so we had our first customers actually really, really, really early, and then we did what is perhaps one of the first of many, many mistakes of the business, which is turn that off. Back in 2013, this is an era where Facebook proudly had made no revenue for many years before becoming a multi-billion-dollar company. Right, you
Right.
saw all these companies out there that were just going for user base and growth before making a penny. And we were like, we're going to stay free for as long as possible. And for us, there was like nearly 5 years, believe it or not, where we're just a totally free
Wow.
product, just building in the open, getting users, had millions of people actually visiting the website, found us through Google, found us through word of mouth, were using us, but we're a totally free product. And if I can do it all over again, I wouldn't do that again.
Yeah.
It meant we had to raise a lot of venture capital to finance us during that period of time, right? That's the only way
Right.
to finance you if you
Right.
continue
To
to stay
finance
free,
that.
um,
Yeah.
because you're making money off your own revenue. The other thing too is it turns out, and this is obvious in retrospect, that the things you build for free, customers have a different set of expectations, right?
And
Totally
and
different.
not only
Yeah,
do they have a different set of expectations, but you haven't proven product market fit because you haven't proven that they're willing to pay for it.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I think we started getting a lot more disciplined and interesting as a company when we started putting a price point on the product. So though we were working on, I think, really interesting cutting edge AI stuff from day one and other approaches too, we had all kinds of approaches to try to get users, try to get people to like the product, et cetera. We only really started learning our lesson when we started charging for it. In retrospect, it's like the most obvious thing ever. And I think that
Right.
fashion of building companies has totally gone out of style, which is good. I think it's
It
good for the
totally
world.
has.
Yeah, it's good for the world.
It totally
Yeah.
has gone out of style. I mean, the pressure nowadays from the VC space is all about being more efficient, cash flow efficient, get to profitability, which if you come from a service business, you're like, yeah, of course you want
It's the
profitability.
means to run the
When I
business.
ran my
Yeah.
own law firm, there's no food to eat if we're not profitable. There is no let me work on this stuff for free. Like that's not how it works. Like I
Yep.
can't pay people, you
Yep.
know.
That's
Um
100% correct.
but
Yes.
yeah, secondly to that, the interesting thing though is the flip side, right? Which is two things. One is when you have all these customers or clients that are coming in and it's free, you don't know from their feedback what is truly important to the ones that will eventually pay you, who are the real customers, right? The rest are users and customers, right?
Totally.
The customers that are paying you are the ones that you really want to be listening to because they're putting their money where their mouth is and saying, hey, I'm investing in you and your company This is what I want in return. And but you don't know who's who because nobody's paying, right? But on the flip side, you're getting tons of feedback, and people, the barrier to entry for people to sign up is a lot lower. So
Yeah.
you're getting a lot more people. So I mean, there's when you look back on it, you go, well, maybe if not for us having that free stage, we would not have as many people in our system as possible.
Yeah, and things turned out really well for us so far. And
Yeah.
so really if I were to go back in time, and I wouldn't change a thing, very happy with where it is.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think I think that if I were to ever start another company, which is obviously not in the cards, right? We're doing this for the next decade at least. Um, if we're ever to give advice to other people starting companies today, it's I would save yourself the pain of going through a moment of believing you can have a free product and that's like the right approach. I think that where the consensus is now, which is all Silicon Valley startups, no matter how much capital you raise, go out and sell something is exactly right for exactly the reasons you mentioned. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So you're going 2013. You launch. You have your demo day. You get funded, and you say we're going to this free module. You said it was about 5 years till you actually started getting paying customers. So probably about 2018, right? 2018, whatever. Sometime in 2018, you're starting to get paying customer. What changed? What changed for you? Not why did you go to paying? Because obviously you have to at some point. But what did you realize was very different from when you suddenly had paying customers versus the free users?
Well, so to your point, we had to, but also at the same time, we were developing technology where people were literally telling us, I pay you for this. And this is when I think AI really started to kind of reach an early stage of maturity. We released a product maybe that year or the year before called Kara. Is a very early version of AI, not nearly as exciting as we're working on today. But what it did is you can upload any document, like say a brief you were working on or opposing counsel's brief, and read through it, and it'd say, okay, based on what I've read, here are the cases that you haven't yet seen that we think are really important for you to read next. And the technology behind it was not unlike like Pandora or Spotify's Discover Weekly or what have you.
Right.
Like where it would, based on if you like this stuff, you'd love this stuff, right?
Right, right,
But in this case, instead of being songs, it was like cases, statutes, regulations, and a lot of law firms, big and small, started using it a lot. They're like, well, I'm uploading all the opposing counsel stuff into it, and I'm finding the cases that they'd rather we not know about were kind of popping
right,
up.
right, right.
All the fact patterns that are on the same subject matter, same area of law, and the fact patterns that came out the other way, it's like that are maybe more relevant to what we're working on. Okay, like you know, that's like kind of one area. And then uh, people use it for their own work. They're like, well, before I turn this into the partner, or before I turn this into the court, let's just like do a quick check here. Did I miss something
Yeah,
important? Right. And we even saw courts. Like there's one blogger out there who's a judge, like a state judge, who was like, "Oh yeah, I use this all the time." And so we started seeing that kind of traction. We're like, "Wow, okay, this is probably something we can." excuse me. This is something that we can kind of start tackling right now in terms of like monetization. And
yeah.
to your question, like what happened afterwards is the demands immediately went up. We already had
The
users at a very
what went
large
up?
law firm. The demands on us immediately went up as soon as we started charging. Um, we already had users at large law firms. As soon as we had paying users at large law firms, we had to get right on security and have a security program. And we started establishing that in kind of 2017, 2018. We had to get right on like how we architected the program, the reliability, accuracy requirements went way up. We had to professionalize in a serious way as an organization, and we already were, I think, in a pretty good spot at that point, but we had to really up our game there.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have a technology background? Are you a computer scientist, or
Well,
how did
yeah,
you figure
I'm
this
kind
out?
of an odd duck. I mean, so I practiced law, but before that, if you look at my resume, I'm just doing the typical law stuff. I went to undergrad and did like policy I and econ, and went to law school, to bar review, that kind of stuff. But um, actually, before all of that, when I was a kid, I've been coding since I was like 8. I
Wow.
haven't stopped building stuff, regardless of what I was doing professionally. It's just a constant hobby. Like, my dad started a small internet business. It's not Google or whatever, so I still have to work for a living. But like, started a company in '93 called Internet Business Systems that focus on building websites and web properties for companies, and then for communities of
Sorry
different
for a
professionals.
second.
Yeah.
For a second, I thought you said Internet Business Machines. I was like IBM,
Yeah,
but apparently
no,
not
no,
IBM.
yeah,
Different
no
company.
IBM. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly, exactly. Again, I'd be in a much more glamorous setting, I think, than my
Yeah.
my attic space where I
Continue.
work out
Sorry.
of. Yeah, exactly. No, Internet Business Systems, and and it's a small tech company, but I mean, I caught the bug early. I mean, I loved building stuff. Could not stop programming. I did it on nights and weekends. You know, I think like some kids and their dad like play catch or like fix cars or whatever. I was building websites with my dad, right? So, um, and I've been doing that since I was a kid. And even when I was at the law firm, I was building stuff. Before I was at the law firm, I was building stuff. Couldn't stop, right? So I don't have a technology training per se, like an
Right.
official technology training, but they say you get 10,000 hours of experience in one thing. That's you get like actually an expert. If there's anything in the
Yeah.
world I have 10,000 hours at, it's building technology stuff. So I came into this with that kind of bent. Like I part of what frustrated me about practicing law is as somebody who knew how to code stuff, I was like, this stuff, the things that are getting in my way of doing a good job for my client, it's not even that hard to kind of build a
Right.
solution for. That was like the most frustrating piece. Like I know exactly what it takes to build a solution here, because I build work in this technology all the time. Why can't these big companies just do it?
Right.
Um, and then of course, it's everything's more challenging when you dive into it. And you have to have that kind of naivete, like I said earlier. But for the most part, I think that was right. I think it's there's a lot of improvements that could be made on the status quo, especially if you have in one person's brain the kind of legal background and knowing what I want to see in practice, and a technology background and the ability to kind of build things and solve my own problems.
Now, do you feel like, so obviously that's been a passion of yours, coding things, building things, making things more efficient, and you got into law, you practiced in big law and all these different areas of law, so you had experience across the field. But do you feel that as you've been out of the law for several years, do you feel like you've lost touch at all on the legal process of stuff? And how do you stay in tune with what the lawyers are doing today?
you know, Even when I started the company, I thought, I had a few years of practice, not nearly as much as you when you started Square Tech. And I thought, oh, I knew it all. Like I know exactly what legal practice looks like. And I was super wrong. I mean, even after having practiced for a bit, there's so much I just didn't see. And I learned really, really early on that the most important source of information always is your customers. You just have to like
Always.
I try to talk to 10 to 20 customers a week. I don't always get to do that. Sometimes other things come up, but pretty close to that. And you learn something literally every time. I've been doing this for 10 years. So learn quite a lot over a long period of time about what people actually do, what they're looking for, what their work product looks like, what they value. And it's always different than what you expect, even if you're consider yourself like a super expert at this,
Oh,
yeah.
100%. I mean, I see, I get a daily report and I see who's ran orders on the system and they get emails from me. I'm sure some of the listeners here know that they've gotten emails from me. That's me personally sending you emails. It's not an automated email. I want everybody to know that I personally send out emails saying, "Hey, do you have 15 minutes to talk?
Yeah,
I want to just hear what you like and what you
yeah,
don't like, and what you'd like us to create that we don't have." And the level of information you get from that, it's just crazy. It's
yeah,
stuff you're like, you know what? You're right. We should be doing. Why aren't we doing that?
yeah.
Let's go do that.
Yes, exactly, 100%. And I think at the times we've been doing our best, we've had that like direct line of communication with our customers always. And the times where we've made our biggest mistakes is when we thought we knew better, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, by the way, this is true of law practices. I
Yeah.
think that law
Any business.
practices, yeah, any business, literally any business. I think law practices where, for example, where you have say a really positive engagement with the customer and the client, and you win or you settle and it's a good settlement or whatever, you just take a second and be like, hey, what was good about that experience? Like, would you
Hmm.
recommend me to a friend? Why not? Let's be like adult about it. Let's have a conversation about it. And what you
Yeah.
learn in those conversations is just like absolutely phenomenal, right? It's
And
like
one of the questions I love to ask, because it's easy for people to say, "Oh, it was great." Yes, and I always say, "What could we have done better?"
totally.
And that just frames it where it's like you have to come up with a negative
Yes.
without me saying, like, say something like, what would you have liked us to have done better?
Such an important part. And the other piece of it too is even when they're giving you compliments, So then the things they focus on will be things that you weren't expecting. It's like, oh, I like how quickly you answered the phone, didn't ring
That's a good
forever.
point.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
That's what you care about? It's like, yeah, that's what I care about.
Yeah,
What
that's a good
customers care
point.
about sometimes is very different than things you go in expecting. It's like, you didn't like my
Yeah.
brief. You didn't think I'd handle
Yeah.
discovery really well. It's like, I didn't read any of that. I don't know what you're talking about. I really liked how responsive you are. People
Yeah.
value things that you may not assume going into it, or that may not have made you successful to this point. There might be new things that'll make you successful to the next point, like the next kind of stage in your career or the next stage of building your business. And you'll always hear from your customers first, 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So 2018, you start getting paid customers. Were you surprised either in a positive way or a negative way with your first year revenue?
I didn't really know what to expect. Um, and there are a lot of public benchmarks out there about how well a young and growing company goes from, like, say, zero to its first million, from its million to the first 10 million, right, 10 million and beyond. And you start to compare yourself against the benchmarks. And one thing that will become immediately evident to anybody running a business is, first of all, you're not Slack. Um, Slack famously went from 1 million to $10 million in revenue over the course of like 2 months or something like that. And
Right.
so,
It was
yeah,
insane. Yeah.
it's and that wasn't us. At the same time, you start looking at it, like, you know what? In this little field of making technology that serves lawyers, not something that many venture capitalists think about, right? Not something that, because they're thinking about consumer technology and making better. I don't know,
Bigger
like,
markets,
yeah,
technically,
exactly,
right?
exactly. You can do pretty well, right? Because we were talking about professionals who are looking to make their lives better and their clients' lives better. And what lawyers ultimately care about at the end of the day is doing a great job. It's universal, right? Obviously, care about
Yeah.
being more efficient, being more effective,
Yeah.
right? But at the end of the day, every single lawyer just cares about doing the best job they possibly can. Every lawyer gets satisfaction out of just absolutely doing a wonderful, wonderful work for their clients. Super unifying feature. And if you can tap into a technology that enables them to do that, empowers them to do that, you get rewarded in the market with
Yeah.
customers and word of mouth, people telling each other, like, hey, you should really check this out. And that's what ultimately builds great businesses. And so, um, yeah, I don't know if I was surprised or not surprised. I honestly had no idea what to expect, but I will say it's like, you know, I think that what we've seen ourselves, I'm sure you're going through similar experiences. You can build a really great business making technology for lawyers. And I think, to fast forward 5 years from now, the more transformative your solution becomes, the more uh, you're rewarded in the market by people who give you attention, give you, time and feedback, and their money, kind of, you said earlier, putting their money where their mouth is. Like where we are today, where AI has been able to bring us to this point, has meant that, um, we're growing incredibly quickly. And we were talking to some venture capitalists, and they say we're the fastest growing company we've seen, not just in legal, period, right?
Right.
Because there's a vast market of people, in the legal space, who are looking to just do their jobs better. If there's technology that can do that at an appealing price point, why not, right? So I think there's,
Yeah.
to people listening to this and thinking, like, should I start a company in the legal tech space? It's not easy, and that first year is always the hardest. The first few years is the hardest. It's your product is least evolved, and you've heard the least from customers, and there's so much you have to do. There's no question about it. But if you can get off the ground there and improve your product with that same kind of urgency and velocity that got us to building a product in the first 3 months, you're in a really good spot, to building a great company. And ultimately, I've been talking about
And,
building a great business. A big piece of that, by the way, is just making your customers successful, right? And I derive a lot of joy, regardless of how the business is doing, like the numbers of the business. Even when we were totally free, just hearing those stories of, like, hey, I used your product, and this is the impact it had for my client.
yeah.
That's what ends up, really, I think, getting me and everybody that works at Casetext just super excited at the end of the day. It's like um, it's a rush to be able to build something that really makes an impact on somebody else's life. Total strangers.
Yeah, I mean this idea that you can take this 100, 200-year-old profession and something you built is helping lawyers who have been trained in law school and passed the bar and trained by lawyers, and you say, "Hey, we're going to give you rocket fuel and you're going to do a better job than somebody not using our product." To me that is there, I mean, what bigger compliment could you want, right? Like that's the compliment is you're taking something really complicated. I grew up in a family that had no lawyers. My parents worked administrative jobs. We grew up in a kind of poor area of town. Lawyers were seen as like just geniuses who know everything. And so to come into this profession and say, hey, look, not only can I be a lawyer, but I can build something that can help all lawyers. Because as a lawyer, I can only help my clients, right? Or the clients within the firm.
Yeah.
But as a legal technologist, I can help clients across all legal platforms.
Yeah.
And what I see with AI and what I've told people before is I'm an optimist, right? And what I see is that I see more cases that are going to be decided on the merits versus resources. And that to me is the game changer. Is you can take programs like Casetext, Esquire Tech, and all the other pieces of legal technology that are out there, and now cases are decided on justice and the merits versus this firm has more resources or this company has more money. It's, hey, we're all even now. And what's going to really happen is we're going to see who's got truth and honor and justice on their side. And that's what I get excited about.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I mean, I think it speaks directly to the mission when we started the business to begin with. Our mission is about, the way we look at it anyways is just like doctors make patients healthier. And if you create technology, like say like an MRI machine that gives them more information, right, you're going to have healthier patients at the end of the day. Like we're juris doctors, we're doctors of justice, like literally, right? And so
Yeah.
if you make technology that helps lawyers, the end result is justice. It's like just like making doctors more effective. The end result is health. Same exact thing. And we think that's the most exciting aspect of this. We've heard stories in the past, I'm sure you have too, of people saying, because of you, my client who may have spent the rest of their life in jail is now free. Right? We were able to get that evidence excluded or get the, fine case law that says that what he did was actually, a criminal or what have you, right? Write the right motion to dismiss. That kind of impact, right? Another kind of lighter but still like heavy version of this is right now with our co-counsel product, we're working with organizations like the California Innocence Project, and they have a 3-year backlog of cases just to review whether they want to take them or not. So you could be innocent and in jail, writing the Innocence Project with all the evidence, right, that could get them to pay attention to your case. And they were just limited by the human staff that they have to review all those documents. And they've begun to use our technology that specifically for one of co-counsel's skills is the ability to read and review documents. So they're putting those sometimes many thousands of pages of police reports and witness statements and trial transcripts and asking questions like, did a witness identify somebody and then change their mind and identify somebody else later? Okay, we'll dig, right? Did the police report contradict materially with the outcome in the trial, right? Like, looking for little hints, the same exact kind of hints they're looking for when a human reviews these documents, and finding that they're able to, decide what cases to take on at a rate that's almost twice as fast. They've cut that pile down to less than a year, right? Still more work to be done, but it's still necessarily a human work that has to happen here. But people will be getting their cases assessed and heard by the Innocence Project faster because of technology. And that's the kind of impact for those listening who are thinking about starting their own company here, that is not just going to get you excited as the founder, but when you're building a business that has maybe hundreds of people in it, everybody aligns around that. There's not a single person in my business who doesn't know those kinds of stories, who isn't, jazzed by that. And, frankly, you do impossible things with startups. Like you create new things that never existed before. You pull many all-nighters, out of thin air. Exactly. It seems impossible. The only way that happens, you have a lot of people who are super motivated to work on a compelling mission, because money is not going to be enough, right? All these folks can make much more money. I don't tell them this. We make much more money at Google or Facebook or whatever, right?
No, I mean, it's just reality. That's just reality. Like, you have to believe in the mission, because any startup, you're not going to be, it's just, I mean, there's no other way to put it, right? You cannot compete with Facebook and Google and the ping pong tables and all that stuff. That's just not why you're doing it. You're doing it because you love it. You love the people you work with. The definition of heaven is building something you want to build with the people you want to build it with. And that's what you get to do when you start your own startup, and you get to pick your team and play with the team you want to play with, which is awesome.
It's so amazing. It's so amazing. You can't beat that. And frankly, in some ways, the tech ecosystem where there are super highly paid, but otherwise kind of boring dead end jobs at the larger companies, um, has presented a situation where people who opt in to work at a startup are a special breed of people. So you're already dealing with the kinds of folks who care less about the ping pong tables and more about getting
Yeah.
real work done and really helping folks. And
And
that's a
making an
special group
impact.
making impact.
They have
Exactly.
to you need people that care about making an impact, and
Yeah.
because you care about making an impact, because no one's getting paid on a startup for a long time. You make much more money getting out other doing other stuff. But switching gears a little bit, one of the things we love to talk about on this podcast, and what helps me when I grow Esquire Tech, and what helped me when I grew my firm is talking to people that have been there, and they told me a little bit about some of the struggles they dealt with, because it made me realize I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
So, what do you think were like the three biggest potholes you hit on the way to where you're at now, and how did you deal with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Only three. um,
Yeah, right, right.
I think that so to start at a super high level for a second, what people told me before starting the company is that it's like a roller coaster. And I thought that was just like a saying, but actually the physical emotion that you will feel is there are times when your stomach is in your throat because everything's just dropping, and other times your heart just going because everything's just so fun. And those things will happen like back to back. I mean, sometimes it's always the small things that end up mattering the most. I mean, sometimes you will raise a large round of venture capital and you're on the top of the world. You're super excited about, the money you have now to go get your vision. And then the next day, literally, a major competitor will announce a competitive product here. And then all of a sudden, all the oxygen sucked out of the air, and you have to deal with a bunch of, something will happen, and this will happen to, I think, every startup is you may have a better product objectively than your competitors. And if you have a competitor that's bigger and more well known, et cetera, you're still fighting an uphill battle, right?
Yeah,
So there have been times we came out with Kara, and within 2 years, actually all on the same day, after 2 years after we released Kara, um, three of the major players in the legal research space all came out with products with like identical kind of interfaces. Still to this day, my personal thing is not nearly as good. Still to the present, but it still made things a lot harder. So it forced us to kind of keep on building more stuff. Um,
yeah.
and it's that happens. Maybe one of the three. Second of the three is there have definitely been times where, especially when we weren't making as much revenue as we are now, the only way to finance the business was through capital raise, and that's always a gut wrenching and difficult experience. Um, for most of us in our professional and personal lives, you just don't handle a lot of rejection. Sure, you don't get into every law school you apply to and every
Well,
undergraduate you
you weren't me in high school, so
get.
that's fine. I guess we had different high school experiences, Jake, but that's
Oh
all good.
man. I mean, fair enough. I mean, sometimes in love, right? For example, as an example, you get plenty of rejection, but like, it's nothing like the kind of rejection you get in the venture capital world. Because you
Yeah,
go out and talk to 60 different venture capital firms, some which you get very, very close to, but their economics often are they're only going to make one or two investments a year. And so you have to really click. And they may walk away from you for reasons that have nothing to do with you and have everything to do with their thesis behind the way they built the firm or what they're looking for at the moment, or they've already made the two this year. It's, it's like, um, it is hard. It is a very, very, very hard process. And it should be, right? Because you're asking somebody for millions of dollars to help you build your business. They're very discerning, very, very, very careful about where they invest in. And those can be really tough moments. I mean, luckily for us, we came out the other end of all of our fundraising processes with the capital we needed to build the business. But there are always dark moments during that process where you're like, I'm told no straight 30 to 50 to 60 times. And that's tough. That is super, super tough. I think people who've been in sales before have a better stomach for it. As like a lawyer, you know, and you win, you lose, it happens, but it feels different to be rejected on this level, I'd say, right? It's like,
yeah.
then it's about the facts of your case, and there's only so much you can do, right? You put the best work in you possibly could. Um, you know, when you get rejected by a VC, it's like the thing you've built for our standards aren't good enough. That's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah.
So it's maybe a second kind of moment that's been really tough. I think the third thing that's really tough is losing good people. Uh,
Mm.
the team is everything. It's really everything. And, sometimes people have to just move or move on to another opportunity or get offered something they really can't turn down, or have a family issue or what have you, and you can feel the impact immediately across the business. And I'll say, like, there's kind of two sides of it. The first side of it is, um, you lose sometimes people who are great for their culture, who are great for, just like their presence uplifts everybody. They do great work. And those are just super, super painful. I will say, as advice to, if I can go back in time and give myself advice, or to future kind of entrepreneurs, it almost always feels at those moments like everything is about to end. Because how could you possibly do it without Bob or Jane or whatever? And the reality is, you can always find a path to keep on building. And there isn't any one person. The beauty of building a business and a company, an organization, is that the sum of its parts is much greater than any of its individual parts. And so you can always, always, always find a way to keep on building and keep on growing, and do great work. But at the moment, man, it feels it's harsh. It's very, very gut wrenching to especially
It's
to
like
either let
it's
go
like
somebody,
sometimes.
or lose somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, just jump in. It's like what's the right word I'm looking for is like it's like a pillar in a building that's like part of the support system. And when that
Yeah.
gets taken away, it's like, hold on, how do we hold this building up right now? For a minute until we find somebody, or a group of people that can help replace that. And then, as you get bigger and as you have like the position you're in now and the way your company is now, you can build in redundancies and you're okay. But in those early days, you just can't afford to have the redundancies.
So it's you and five other people. That's it, or what have you. And if somebody leaves, that is like a 20% of the company or whatever, right? So
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
it's a big deal. And to your point, I mean, I think the best founders always find a path. It's like you sometimes watch this. I watch a lot of football. You sometimes watch these football teams where an amazing player gets traded away, and you're like, oh my god, how can we possibly win? And the best coaches are like, you know what? Maybe now this year we're going to really double down on defense. And sure, we may not score a bunch of points, but we are definitely not let them score any points at all. And you see teams make it to the Super Bowl without their star quarterback from the last year, um,
Yeah,
just on a different strategy, right?
yeah.
And or you find a diamond in the rough, you find some rookie or whatever. I'm a 49ers fan. I'm from the Bay Area, right? Brock Purdy out of
Brock
nowhere,
Purdy,
Mr.
yeah,
Irrelevant, yeah, last pick in the draft, almost gets us all
yeah,
the way, right?
yeah,
Until he suffered kind
yeah.
of a terrible injury in that last game. It's like, um, it's uh, and so the best founders are like coaches of those teams who just find a path to the right kind of result, even after the great player gets traded away, and there's always a
And
path.
at the end of the day, if you have a product that people like and they're paying for and it's helping them, um, don't give up. Like keep going
Yeah.
because that's the hard part. The hard part is creating a product that people like and want to pay for, and that is providing value to them. Once you've done that, if you're just willing to put in the hard work every day, like just keep going. And that goes back to something you touched on earlier that I want to touch on is you talked about these benchmarks, right? There's all these public benchmarks and VCs, and everybody's got their own benchmarks of where your company should be at year one and where it should be at year two. Honestly, like forget all that. It
Yes.
really is
The
kind of
healthiest.
irrelevant, right?
That is the healthiest thing. Just build a great business and build something
Just build a
product people
great
love.
business. Now,
Yeah.
unless you've got investors breathing down your neck, or you want to go out and raise from VCs and you want to meet their guidelines because you want to show that you're a good fit for a particular VC, but if you're not beholden to that situation, or if you've already raised and you're not there, just build a great business. Don't worry if they say, oh, you got to hit the million in 8 months and you hit it in month 12. Who cares? It doesn't mean you're going to fail. Just keep working on the business, taking care of your clients, doing what's best for them, taking care of your employees, doing what's best for them, and the rest will kind of figure itself out.
Yes. 100%. And I mean, to the point you made just a second ago too is so important. If you believe in what you're doing and you believe there's a path, don't give up. Uh, what they tell you when you're first starting a company is really hope you're really excited about this problem, because it usually takes about 10 years to be successful. And I think what a lot
Yeah.
of founders here, including myself, what you hear is, okay, that's what typical people take, but we're to get there a lot faster. But I'm telling you, 10 years in,
Yeah.
that's literally exactly how long it took. We are in this amazing place today. We are growing fast. We have a great team. We have a great product. Like you said, like we're all over the news. I mean, that's never happened before to us as a legal AI company. Nobody cared, frankly.
Nobody cares. Yeah.
Yeah, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. Um, There's a saying in Silicon Valley, a 10-year overnight success. And it's
Yeah.
kind of a jokey saying of like, the 10-year overnight success. That's exactly what it feels like we're in right now. And there's many, many moments where it's like, you know what? Things are hard. We lost our best person. It's hard to raise capital. Our competitors are coming with competitive products. It would be easy for us to sell to another company at a low price and just like take the, you know, severance basically, move on or whatever.
Yeah.
And um,
Yeah.
and every single time we had those kinds of moments, we're like, you know what? We think there's something here still. We're going to keep on building. We think the AI is going to make a big impact in the legal profession. Um, and whether we got lucky or we made our own luck or some some combination of those two, that ended up being true. And I can't guarantee
Yeah.
it'll be true for everybody who sticks it out for 10 years, but I do think that if you're building for 10 years, you're listening to your customers, you're getting really good at this, at a certain point it clicks. And sometimes it's earlier than 10
Yeah.
years, sometimes it takes a full decade to get there. But again, I wouldn't trade it for a thing. It's an amazing experience along the way. And once you're on the other end of it and things are really growing like you really wanted them to be, and you're getting the right kind of customer interactions you're really hoping for this 10 years, it feels incredible. It just feels absolutely incredible. And
Yeah.
it's, I will say, I mean, the irony is before I started Casetext, before I even started practicing, one path I thought for myself was like, should I go get a PhD and become a professor or whatever? Should I go into academics? I'm sort of an academic bent. And um, I was like, no, I could possibly focus like 6 or 7 years on a single topic. It's a
Yeah.
literal thought that I had in my head. And
Yeah. It
um,
changes all the time, and it's so exciting to be at the forefront.
oh yeah,
You know.
oh my God, yes. I mean, the exact opposite with. I mean, I'm running this business for 10 years. I have the energy for at least another 20 or 30.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's
Yeah.
on one hand, I'm getting my PhD in case text, right? And so against what I thought earlier, it is very, very possible to stay super engaged and excited and interested over a course of a very long period of time. On the one hand, and then on the other
Yeah.
hand, things running a business, it is just so everything, you know, it's kind of a negative way of putting it, but still true. You overcome some set of challenges, and then a whole new set of challenges and problems presents the
Oh
next day,
yeah, challenges
and
you
they're
never
always bigger.
expected. You feel like,
Yeah,
oh, once I get through this hump, it'll be smooth sailing, and you
never
just
is.
encounter a whole different set of rough seas.
Exactly, exactly. I remember talking to CEO of a large public company, one of Y Combinator's first investments, that ended up becoming very, very successful. And he spoke to that exactly. It's like, you know what? We were at $0 in revenue, $1 million in revenue, $100 million in revenue, nearing $1 billion in revenue. And at every single stage, I always thought to myself that next part's going to be easy sailing, got the team set up,
Yeah.
everything. And it's like, nope, it's just new, more complex and larger problems for me to deal with. And
Yeah.
that is the truth, man. Um,
That's awesome. That's awesome. I want to keep us on time. I know you got a company to keep building, so I don't want to keep you too long. But a couple more questions. I want to talk a little bit about Code Counsel, and I love the product. You did the demo for me personally, which I was very appreciative of. It's like Bill Gates showing you Microsoft, which I thought was pretty cool.
I don't know
And
if quite Bill Gates, Bill Gates, yeah, but I
that's
appreciate
pretty
it.
cool.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I played with it. I did the free trial, and I got to upload documents and have it write memos for me. And it's almost like having a 1L, like somebody who graduated law school. It's not going to be perfect, right? I don't let's speak freely here. Nothing's perfect, right? You still got to be a lawyer. Otherwise, you don't want it to be perfect or you don't have a job. And so, but it's about 95% there. I upload things or I ask it questions, and it takes this like 2 hour job down to 20 minutes because now all I got to do is edit as opposed to create and then edit.
yeah. It's pretty incredible. And I mean, you know, a lot of the credit here, goes first of all to the way the technology is developing to a place. I mean, what we saw when we started playing with GPT-4 about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, is you're talking about an AI that can read and understand and write and reason at a postgraduate level. And I don't just mean postgraduate in law, I mean like in medicine and finance and
Right?
business. And I don't just mean in English, I mean in like Japanese and Hebrew, you name it, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about something that is reading and understanding at a super deep level. And a lot of people have experienced ChatGPT. And ChatGPT, I think, shows people that first experience like, oh, wow, I'm talking to something that's actually quite intelligent here and quite exciting and quite interesting. So on the one hand, you see that, right? And on the other hand, you recognize like, okay, well, I can't really use this for practice. It's like, not accurate enough. Like if you ask me to do legal research for you, it's like, well, I haven't been
Right.
updated since 2021. And, anyways, and then it'll make up cases. Like, oh, the Smith case. It's like, that's not real.
Yeah.
So
That's not a real
it's
case.
not a real case. It's not scaled. Like I can't do it over 1,000 documents or 1,000,000 documents or even 10 documents,
Right.
right? Like one long document. You just chat with it, and ask questions about maybe a portion of a document, copy and paste in there. And it's not secure or safe, right? They're learning from every interaction you have. So ChatGPT is an exciting technology, but it's not all the way there. But we saw this opportunity to take components of that technology and turn that into something that, when used appropriately, can ground itself in real information. So it's not making stuff up and it's not out of date. It's using an up to date to the minute database of live updating information that can operate over millions of documents, um, in a single day, and just ask it, like you said, any questions, and it will come back and um, answer anything for you, and it's safe and secure because we're
Yeah.
using a different kind of server architecture. So you nail those three things, and all of a sudden you go from an AI that's kind of fun to use to an AI that's useful for professionals. And we think that's like a super exciting opportunity. And like you said,
That's definitely a
check its work.
leapfrog, right?
Like, yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's like exactly what you're saying earlier in terms of leveling the playing field, about putting people in a position to make it just about the facts of the case and the law, right? Let's
Yeah.
get it used to be the case, in the recent past, where you're a smaller firm, if it gets a bigger firm, they would just staff. You see those kind of like, classic sketches of a courtroom. It's like a table, stacked with
Yeah.
people. And then the one person that is the whole firm is on the other table,
Right.
right? In a litigation, say. Um, and now it just doesn't matter. It's just the number of people you stack on it doesn't matter. The intelligence matters. What questions you
Yeah.
choose to ask matters. How well you supervise this kind of AI. You check its work,
Yeah.
and make sure it's to your liking. You ask it to review 1,000 documents, but it will tell you where it's getting its answers from, what pages it's getting from. You can fact check that stuff, right? So you're
Right.
basically being like a partner to this new associate you have, that puts you in an amazing position of capability. And, um, yeah, we hope that it's to people use it. It's like a new superpower, you know.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
think everybody should go check it out. And nothing's perfect for everybody. And I tell people all the time, even with Car Tech, like not everything's a fit for everybody. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's a fit for everybody, but you should at least give it a shot and play with it. And I think more people will find it as a fit for themselves than less, than people that won't. It's I really enjoy it. I use it. I'm trying to get the firm to get on it. I'm pushing that. But the last question I have for you, and we'll wrap up to keep it on time here, is the question I ask everybody, and you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, is if you could go back to the younger Jay Keller and give him a couple pieces of advice, what would they be? What would you tell him?
don't stop believing. It's a 10-year
Don't stop.
ride, but it gets progressively better over time. Um, I would say, and it's the most important piece of advice for what it's worth, is just if you really believe what you're doing, make it through to the other side. There will be another side, even if it feels super remote sometimes. Um, I would. What's funny is I give myself all of the stock advice people get when they're starting companies. It's going to be a roller coaster. Get ready for that. And the funny thing is that younger Jake just would not understand because I have not been through it
Yeah,
yet.
I know.
You
Everybody
know,
says that. They're
um,
like, I could tell
yeah,
younger me anything, and they won't listen.
they won't listen. Yeah, which is mostly supremely frustrating for advisors and investors and so on. I definitely say start making money earlier. I was told that by my investors and advisors. Should have listened, right? Um, and maybe the most important piece of advice, and the really hard piece of advice here is, on the one hand, listen, like shut up and listen. Like people with experience know what they're talking about. On the other hand, you need to know when to go with your gut against the advice you're getting.
Yeah,
And
and that's
it's
the
a
hard
super
balance of
tough,
being an
it's a hard
entrepreneur.
balance, super hard balance. Um,
Yeah.
you know, this isn't as applicable anymore. But back when Medium used to be a big publishing platform, there used to be a lot of like startup advice on Medium, and you'd read it and you're like, and they'd say like, this is the one way you must do things. And we had a joke inside the company. We call it medium brain, which is like,
Yeah.
kind of a play on words here a little bit, but like, it's like, that's, you can really easily fall into a trap. You're like, oh, some person wrote about this on Medium. We have to do it this way. It's like, well, maybe that worked for their company in their context. Or
Yeah.
maybe there's some like 22-year-old who's just getting their kind of thoughts out there,
You,
um, and
you know,
don't,
you're a
don't fall
thousand
into that
percent
trap
correct.
either. Yeah.
You're 1,000% correct. I've fallen into that trap. I've read every book there is, right? From Zero to One, Crossing the Chasm, Ready, Fire, Aim. I've read all of them. All the books you should read, Good to Great. I've read all of them. Okay. And I read it all the time. I read Jason Lemkin's blog. I read all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And what you find is everybody gives different advice and everybody says this is the way to do it. And
Yep.
because what they're telling you is what worked for them, and that may work for you, but it may not work for you. And so I mean, what you said I think is so astute, which is you have to trust yourself and trust your instincts, and know when your instincts say follow that advice, follow that advice. But when your instincts say, that just may not be right for me, then go against the grain a little bit. It's okay.
Maybe one last piece of advice I give myself. Now that I think about it, like I think it's really important through the process to be true to yourself, not just listen to your gut, but to be true to who you are as a person. Like with my employees, I'm like criminally nice. My employees, my customers, and I'm constantly doing things to the chagrin of others. Like, okay, the customer had a bad experience. We're gonna give them something for free here. It's like a really big gift. We're gonna make it right, or employees asking for this kind of accommodation, and nine CEOs out of 10 be like, that's way too much. And I'm like, you know what? I understand you got something going on in your life. I'll give you that accommodation. And uh, I think there's a lot of like lore out there about the real like a-hole CEOs. And don't get me wrong, you can't get walked all over. You have to have backbone when you're building a business. There's no question about it. But it's also possible to stay true to yourself, to be nice. Ultimately, at the end of the day, a lot of the fights that people get into don't matter. It's actually almost
Don't.
binary. It's like yes or no. Are you going to build something that people really love, and win their business and keep them as customers, and or you're not. And all the small things along the way, if you really get kind of angry over them, make them into big fights, lose good people over them, I think a lot of folks would look back at those and be like, was that really worth it? You know,
Yeah.
both from a perspective of building a good business and also like life is short, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and so being true to myself meant being way nicer and more generous than my board probably wants me to be sometimes, than my wife is like, you're doing what? Like, you're giving them
Yeah.
what? Uh, and
Yeah.
you know what? It's worked out. And it won't
Yeah.
work out for everybody. If it's not your style, it's not your style. But I think there's a path to be true to yourself, whatever that means, even if it means going against the grain, even if it means being more generous or less generous, if that's your thing, right? Or whatever it is. Um, there's almost always a way to make it work if you build something people really want and you have a great business, right? Like, and everything else, all the little details around, giving this or not giving that, or doing this, not that, ends up barely mattering, it turns out. It's not the things you'll remember, not things you'll be remembered for, not, not what makes your product good, not what makes your customers like you. And so I think
I
it's
love that.
about just being, being your authentic self. And I think you see that, by the way, a lot in lawyers. You know, you see that in the way they dress, in the way they act, the way they behave. It's like the people who do this best. It's like that's not my style, but that's their style, and it works for them because they're being real.
Yeah.
And that's really who they are. And those are, I think, some of the most successful people in every field. I always admire it is people who've tapped into what makes them great. And they don't do whatever makes anybody else great. And and they might do a totally different kind of approach than anybody else, and it works. So you just have to be like anybody else. Just be true to yourself.
I love that. I love that. That's a great place for us to wrap up and keep you on time. Thank you so much for taking time out of building a big company. Thanks for listening or watching. We'll see you on the next episode of Bootstrapped Solo. And remember, just because guys like Jake make it look effortless and easy, it doesn't mean that it is. One ask, if you enjoyed the pod, please share where you share stuff. LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok. We don't sell anything on here. We can only grow and get great guests like Jake if you let others know about it. So we'd appreciate your help in doing that. And thank you, and see you next time on Bootstrap Solo.